2024 was a terrible year for games. Not because the games were bad, of course. I played more good games in 2024 than in many past years. No, 2024 was a bad year for games because it was bad for the people that make games. Worse than 2022 and 2023 before May even rolled around. It was awful, and my heart breaks for the people and the studios that constantly give my favorite medium life. I wish I had something more insightful to say, or a hopeful message for the future, but it's not as though we can't pretend we aren't halfway into 2025, with a lot of terrible things continuing to happen. All I can do is wish them the best, talk about how these games impacted me, and record how I think they'll be remembered as we go on. You also probably noticed a new look. As much as I hate to put the plug this early, there has been a bit of a change here on this channel. This is now 𝒔𝒐𝒎𝒆𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒏𝒈, where all of my scripted stuff will continue to be. However, I recorded this live on twitch.tv/𝒔𝒐𝒎𝒆𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒏𝒈. If you want proof, the full recordings are over at the 𝒔𝒐𝒎𝒆𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒏𝒈 Fields on YouTube, and some more edited stuff is over at 𝒔𝒐𝒎𝒆𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒏𝒈. It's been a great experience for me, and I would love it if you joined us. With all that out of the way, we have a lot to cover, so I'm 𝒔𝒐𝒎𝒆𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒏𝒈, and this is me saying something about every game I played in 2024. First, and technically last, sail forth at 31. An honorable mention from 2023, mostly because I was shocked by how invested I got in this game. It's pretty bare bones. You sail ships, customize your fleet and weapons, and take missions to better customize your fleet and weapons. It is pretty simple, but I got nearly 20 hours out of this game, and I don't know where that time went. I think the trick of it is that there is very little that doesn't flow back into the main mechanics. It's really easy to just go from one objective to another without really seeing the seams. The fights are engaging and almost always rewarding because looting is better than buying most of the time. The major complaint I have is that there's some procedural generations to the islands and the world map. It doesn't actually take away from the experience, but it's not necessary. The game is plenty long and there is a good amount of bespoke content here. The procedural elements just feel so inconsequential. I think one handcrafted map that was a little more compact could have made this a much stronger overall experience. There is more than enough here without it. There are challenges, combat trials, and even boss fights. I enjoyed my time plenty, and I didn't even get the hang of sailing. At 30 is Garage Sale. Alright, this is about as indie as you can get. Garage Sale is from a 5-person team whom I personally met at Midwest Gaming Classic back in April of 2024. It's obviously a small project, but this is every game I played. The pixel art is the thing to come for in my opinion, with the cozy tone coming in close second. It's a stroll around a small town festival on a nice summer day. I'll be brutal and say there isn't much more to it than that, but kudos to the team for a shipped work, and I hope that they each set off for bigger projects in the future. 29. Dadish 3D. You're a radish, you're a dad, it's in 3D, what else is there to say? I mean this with all due respect when I say this is brain rot content. Just enough to engage my fingers in lieu of scrolling Twitter while watching something on TV. It's fine. 𝒔𝒐𝒎𝒆𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒏𝒈. Europa. Europa is just fine. There isn't a much better way of putting it. It's a simple linear platformer that wears its dozen or so inspiration on its sleeve. I'm not going to do it the disservice of dissecting it to show you where each thing came from, but I still think it's important to mention because I don't know what it's trying to bring to the table of its own. The story isn't fleshed out enough to be anything special, and the gameplay isn't interesting enough to stand alone. The presentation clearly has its influences, but it's still my favorite part of the experience, so. I particularly like that the last area of the game being present in every level, and much of the fauna in the areas being hybrids of animal and sleeker mechanical designs. It needed a lot more solid direction or a new idea of its own to get me really interested. Instead, it just feels like an interpretation of a lot of other works mashed together, and that could only ever make it just fine. 27. Pacific Drive. This game makes me angry. Furious even, and that is in no small part due to the fact that there is so much about it that I love. The vibe is perfect. You drive through an SCP-infested Gravity Falls-like area in a Ghostbusters-ass car that you can customize and upgrade. That premise is like 3 degrees off from my dream game, and there is so much charm here. It is easy to fall in love with what this game is trying to do just by walking around your home base fixing your car. The tools you use, the way you have to lovingly labor over this car, feels great. I really did feel a connection to this car. A not insignificant portion of this game is just making it function like you want it to, and the systems involved in making that feel like actual work is incredible. If only I didn't have to play the rest of the dang game, man. For one, I don't like how you have to navigate this world. You travel between static zones via randomized little routes. Each zone is populated with stuff to upgrade and maintain your car, as well as various anomalies and hazards you need to avoid. I hate to be this guy because it's not really a viable suggestion as much as a completely different game, but boy, I wish this was just an open world. It's a game that makes traversal itself the focus, so if there was a game that could have gotten away with an open world shift, it was this one. But honestly, that's just a nitpick. Let's talk about why I gave up on this game. I really don't understand how to approach the structure of this game. It's a survival horror at the end of the day. There is a story that lets you progress, but you can spend a near infinite amount of time in side questing and upgrading before tackling that story. So I opted for a more completionist approach, really taking my time collecting stuff and managing my car's various bars and health, so I was spending resources to fix it. So there I was on a longer story mission. I had already stripped 3 zones of all useful materials, and my car was doing just fine. But the final zone really wore me down. The hazards and anomalies in this game just never sat right with me. They weren't scary, and they didn't build tension exactly, they were just constantly harassing me. Something you had to deal with. Suddenly, an area with an objective can't be safely navigated, or you just have to drive through some damaging anomaly, or risk a route 3 times longer with no guarantee that something worse won't spawn on you anyway. This one zone eventually wore my car down to the point where it needed a full rebuild. But that was alright because I had already planned on that. I played carefully so that I would end the quest right next to the extraction point. Only this time, because of some new story elements, the extraction point was on the complete opposite end of the zone. All my careful looting and planning was pointless. Now I had to cross the entire zone while the game was throwing absolutely everything at me, and predictably, I couldn't make it. Everything I had collected in the past 3 zones was gone, and my car was completely stripped of all the parts I had invested before I started my trip. Not only was it a lot of actual time lost, it would have likely been double just to get my car back to the point where it was when I initially left. The game is not hard, but it is work. Work like putting a car together, and I can only sink so much of my free time before I go do anything else. 26. Mario vs. DK. For as much as I try to be well-rounded with my approach to games and really dive into the smaller, artsy titles, when it comes to Nintendo, I really am hopeless. I very much have the Nintendo mind virus. They could turn around at any time and ask, "Hey, do you want to play this game again for full price?" And I'm usually on board. That's exactly what happened with Mario vs. DK. Not only is this an old game sold at full price, it's an old game sold at full price that I already own on 3DS. But in a moment of laziness and apathy, I just wanted something familiar and polished to play, so I caved on the remake. In the end, I didn't even really enjoy my time with this game that much, and only made it through about half of the post-game. It's a puzzle platformer, so the levels boil down to light puzzle solving and some execution. The problem is that the puzzles in a majority of these levels is how to execute the platforming, not how to overcome the elements of the puzzle. And because the platforming is built around puzzle solving, that means execution mostly just comes down to patience. There is a lot of waiting for puzzle and platforming elements to line up. I already have solved how the level works. It's not difficult to execute, but there is so much waiting in between steps, it already doesn't feel worth it after a failure or 2. It's not a bad game, I just never should have bought it in the first place. 25. Planet Crafter. The genres I find myself gravitating, that's a pun, the genres I find myself gravitating towards the most recently are small open world games and survival crafting games. There are a few entries for both on this list, and when it comes to survival crafting, there are two particular directions generally taken: exploration or automation. It's all about how you're getting the bulk of your materials. Planet Crafter falls more into the exploration category despite having some light automation elements in the late game. I wanted so badly to love this game because its hook is great. You land on a desolate world, and everything you do and build is an effort to fully terraform it. What's more is that it really tries to make that progression feel tangible. You don't just see the oxygen bar fill up on your progress screen, the air becomes more breathable the better you do. The whole world reflects the changes that you make, from the greens growing and the biomes changing to new paths and discoveries across the world opening up. As I said, this is more on the exploration side of the survival crafting spectrum. Most of the resources you need are just lying around the world, and the rarer ones are in harder to find areas. So you spend your time wandering around looking for the resources you need to build the machines that contribute to your terraforming efforts. It's a sound loop, but it's also where my problems lie. This game just does not feel balanced right. It's a weird thing to say about an exploration game, but let me explain. The machines are the things ticking up these bars to make the planet more livable, but the values needed are astronomically high. So high that passive work just won't cut it after a certain threshold, so you have to actively go out and find materials, all while basically no progress is being made by your machines. Then there is another threshold, where your machines will certainly hit the goals you need, and those goals might unlock something so much better, it really isn't worth your time to make your current machines any more effective. It's literally just more efficient to wait. It's a terrible back and forth between exploration wasting your time and building anything other than the next upgrade is a waste of time. If the materials came a bit easier, or multiple goals could be effectively reached with non-optimal machines, it would just feel so much better. I know there have been patches and a DLC, but I already gave this game enough of my time, and it should be considered kind that I waited for the vehicle update after 1.0, because I genuinely don't know how this game launched without that. 24. Prince of Persia: Lost Crown. Search action games are becoming one of those popular genres that results in a good problem. Unless you are playing nothing but search action games, there really isn't a reason to be playing a bad one. If you haven't already played the best of what the genre has to offer, then it feels bad to even bother with the mediocre entries. Maybe that's why I felt so betrayed by Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Is it The Lost Crown, or is it just Lost Crown? I think it's maybe that's why I felt so betrayed by Prince of Persia: Lost Crown. Now I have both. It was exciting to see a new entry in this beloved franchise emerge with such a winning formula and style. Not only was it a 2D title from a bigger publisher, but it was taking a risk by bringing the franchise to the search action genre. I'm not a big Prince of Persia fan, I've literally never played any of the other games, but I was totally on board for a new 2D title, and kinda got swept up in the hype. However, by the end of my experience, I couldn't help but feel like my expectations are what pushed me to finish at all. This game has a lot of core issues. It tried to innovate with its combat by adding various combos and finishers, but I found them unnecessary at best and distracting at worst. For one, your grounded combat is fairly basic, and to get longer combos you are going to want to be launching enemies into the air. However, launching is tricky on some enemies and straight up impossible for the rest, already cutting the usefulness of the combat mechanics in half. Combos are also just not as useful in a group or swarm setting, where you are more likely to get hit out of strings of actions. Most devastating though is that once you discover that nearly all comboable enemies cannot escape a down attack loop, you will have a hard time engaging with the system at all. You can just hit down and attack and win. So the moment-to-moment action in this search action is hindered slightly, and the search might fare worse. The one thing I don't want to show/discuss are the powers you get, because while some of them are your bread and butter movement upgrades, some are truly unique and highlights of the whole game. How a lot of them feel to use as a part of your kit is amazing. Unfortunately, their integration into the world is less so. There is a sacred balance in all good search action games of how much new abilities can grant you access to. Have a power only give you a few more avenues of exploration, and it feels like you wasted your time finding it. Have it open up too many areas, and you increase the odds that the player will get stuck looking for the needle that will open up the haystack of dead ends. Despite the Lost Crown's powers being interesting, it falls into both of these extremes a few times. And for something a bit more subjective, I found that some of the more intense platforming sections were too much. They were hard, but with the stingy checkpointing and one-hit KO design, it ended up feeling more annoying than anything. Which I'd be fine to leave as just a me problem if it weren't for the other core sin of this game. The rewards are terrible. The things you want for exploring were so rarely the things you'd get. Many of the things you'd want, like health upgrades, new powers, and special moves, were all pretty close to the critical path, and the farther away from it you explored, the more difficult it got to traverse and the weaker the reward. Upgrade materials that are easily found elsewhere in the early game, and worse yet, pages of poorly delivered lore. I'm a YouTuber, everyone knows we're illiterate, I just want to hit things harder. Now, to give this game its due, for all of its derivative and odd choices, everything good about it seems to coalesce at the bosses. They are cinematic, the designs are great, and all the mechanics fold back in to great effect. Not all the bosses can be comboed, but the ones that can feel like a one-on-one fighter that I had to build my character out for. It was great. The powers may not be the best to use for exploration, but the more you get, the deeper the combat gets, until you have a way to weave around every attack and interesting new ways to turn the fights in your favor. It's almost worth the price of admission, but it's a steep price. It's not a short game, and you never exactly know what parts are worth engaging with until you've already tried. This one might be best for those running low on other entries in the genre.
Don't leave so soon.
23. Tiny Terry's Turbo Trip. Tiny Terry's Turbo Trip. Tiny Terry's Turbo Trip. Tiny Terry's Turbo Trip. Try saying that more times fast. As much as I hate to be a critic that does nothing but compare games to other games, Tiny Terry's Turbo Trip. Tiny Terry's Turbo Trip really wants to be a modern Simpsons hit and run. But now I get to stop being that guy because I haven't actually played that game. So now let's talk about this game. It's cute, it's colorful, it's got pretty funny writing and style for days. Unfortunately, I don't think any of that makes it a very good game. I see what they were going for. A small open-world game where everyone drives bumper cars whose turning radius sucks. You can get out of your car, take quests, and do some 3D platforming exploration. I'm about to come down pretty hard on a game that has an overwhelmingly positive rating at the time of writing. Not to say I don't understand how people could like this game, I'm just worried that people are giving it a pass because the presentation is nice and the flaws aren't blatant. It just so happens that I play a lot of these games and found a lot of little things that brought down the experience as a whole for me. These small open world games tend to live or die by one of two things. Either the movement of your character and the exploration of the world, or the quest structure and the variety of things you actually do in the game. Terry kind of lands mid on both sides of the equation. The car is fine. It's fast, but it's a bumper car. It's not supposed to feel great to handle. And Terry himself is just rather serviceable, save for his glide, which I really don't like the feel of. The quest structure was also kind of strange. It may not be the best, but the car play is the most interesting of your modes of movement, and the only missions that really involve driving are basically fetch quests. You are on foot most of the game, which leads to my bigger problem with this game. For a small open world, it is easy to mess up some platforming and end up miles away from the actual challenge. A frustrating amount of this game can be seen but not reached without an overly long detour, at which point you are better off just finding something closer to do. I mean, if you have to put elevators in your exploration-based 3D platformer, I feel as though you messed up somewhere. This whole upper highway loop is terrible, due in no small part to this single fence. You can ditch your car and jump, but if you want to stay in your much faster car, you have to keep driving to basically the beginning of the loop before you can go elsewhere. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to put on my fake, angry, objective YouTuber critic hat here for a second. Remove this fence. It doesn't need to be here. There is already precious little reason to be on this route in the first place. At least let the player use it as a fun, one-way shortcut. There is absolutely no reason not to. There are not a lot of games that can match the personality of Tiny Terry, but I would caution in thinking that is enough to make a game good, especially when there is so much here that misses the mark. 22. Children of the Sun. Children of the Sun gets the award for Best Gun Use in a Game for 2024. That use is puzzle solving. It also might get the award for Shortest Entry. Do you know Connect the Dots? Then you get the basic premise, only the dots in this case are the skulls of cultists, and the connecting is done with a magic bullet. It's got the juice that comes with any good sniping encounter, and the level design to make plotting your shots an actual puzzle. It's great and can be beaten in a single sitting or two. Easily worth your time. And that's all I have to say about it, because yeah, it really is that simple. 21. Chasing the Unseen. I don't want to sound mean when I say Chasing the Unseen is a 6 out of 10 game. It's just above mediocre, but it's also the exact kind of game I want to see more of. It's a small game by a solo dev over at Strange Shift Studio. I want more little unique experiences like this from games, even if they don't amount to something revolutionary. At its core, Chasing the Unseen is a puzzle platformer. You jump, climb, and glide to reach your goal of several levels. However, these levels are unlike anything I'm used to seeing in a platformer. They are endless, eerie voids full of twisting nightmare landscapes that hardly make sense. They look as though they might be artificially generated, but as you play through, you see the true artistry at play because there is a coherent platforming level in here. It doesn't matter on how dark and mangled the geometry gets, it's always rather intuitive on where the next step should take you. That is the major draw for the game, just having the intelligent design guide you through these seemingly incomprehensible levels. However, each level also has something special to offer. The first one you'll encounter is the one that got this game on my radar in the first place. It is this giant mass of writhing tentacles. The first couple levels are all about navigating between massive chunks of land by riding this octopus. Some levels have a more distinct vibe and others have more scripted moments. It's an enjoyable time, but it never gets much deeper mechanically than following the path that looks most traversable. So while it's always cool to look at, it never gets extremely interesting to play. I think I would have been a lot more positive if it didn't seem to lock an entire level behind 100% completion. 100%ing this game is a nightmare, and while it does expose a little more depth to the level design than the main game does, it is far too much to the extent I can't find a video of anyone actually making it to the secret level. Lord knows I won't bother. Give it a shot if you want to see what good can come from weird 6 out of 10s, but don't bother completing it. 20. 𝒔𝒐𝒎𝒆𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒈. I put off writing about 𝒔𝒐𝒎𝒆𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒈 for a long time because I didn't exactly do it justice while playing it. It was my second screen game for 2024, and for that, it was great. It's a big open world with lots of meaningful quests and interactions. Alongside climbing, gliding, and boating, you also have this really interesting capture mechanic that lets you hitch a ride with any animal or object, with most offering special movement or puzzle techniques. Flying as a bird was as useful as it sounds, but I got plenty of utility out of rocks just by throwing them, capturing them, and letting gravity do the rest. Speaking personally, it was a great game to unwind and checklist my way through. However, I would take that little review with a grain of salt because I didn't really engage with the game I think it wishes I did. The lead developers are from New Caledonia and wanted to show players a slice of their home. They went to great lengths to capture the essence of the people and culture. It's clear from every aspect of this game that they have a deep love of this place. And while I want to praise them more for their effort, it would feel fairly empty knowing I was watching YouTube in the background while playing. I'll simply say I enjoyed my time thoroughly and it deserves any chance you're willing to give it. 19. Rusty's Retirement. Rusty's Retirement has one of the most unique executions of a game I've played. Instead of running in the background or taking up the whole of your monitor, Rusty's only takes up about a third of your screen and will simply exist as an overlay. I've never interacted with software like this before, and to have a game run like this and be this functional at the same time is certainly novel. What's better is it's not just some gimmick, it's matched perfectly to its gameplay. Despite taking aesthetic inspiration from farming sims, Rusty's is deeply rooted in the tradition of idle games. In other words, it's not a game that you're supposed to play actively. You do a couple chores, then put it down to let it progress on its own. It's a genre that's blown up on mobile because it's something you really only want to spend a couple minutes on at a time, but return to feeling as though you've made some progress. It's an experience that can work elsewhere, but having to open PC software just to check on something for a minute is weirdly a pretty big commitment. I think Rusty solves this problem by making it only an element of your screen, while also making it aesthetically pleasing to have open at all times. The presentation, concept, and technology are all in perfect sync, which is why it pains me to say I think it more or less fails at being a good idle game. I'm about to utter the one criticism that I hate the most in the modern gaming landscape. This game isn't long enough. I know, shorter experiences are often worth their weight, especially in games, but when it comes to idle gaming, longevity makes or breaks the experience. The way Rusty's works as an idler is different than a lot of other games. The inflation in the economy of the game isn't what is going to slow you down as much as the automation. You don't do anything directly in this game. Rusty does it all. He builds the fields, plants the crops, waters the plants, harvests the products, and brings it to market. Your interactivity comes down to telling him exactly what way he should do that, but you are still waiting for him to do it. Of course, there is a progression in this game. You'll unlock crops that are more profitable, but that alone won't make this game work. The problem at this game's core is that Rusty alone would take too much time to micromanage to have an efficient farm. You would have to actively play by waiting 20 seconds here and there to tell him to do a new thing. The game solves this with automation. The game progresses more along your automation line than the actual crop you grow. Getting your farm more and more automated is fun, and there are more crop and aesthetic unlocks along the way, but you are automating yourself out of the game. There is a point where if you want to just be profitable or you already have a farm looking the way you want it to, you can effectively just sit back and wait for the game to beat itself. It lacks any exponential curve that gives idlers dependency on the player even after days of playing. As an idler, it fails because you can have a completed farm after a single workday of passive playing. It's so disappointing because it does have such a slick presentation and does provide my brain with that little break it needs while working, without the risk of long-term distraction like Twitter or YouTube has. I hate simply suggesting to make games longer because do more is such a useless criticism, but this game needs length. Maybe a rebalance would do it, or maybe it was only ever supposed to be wearing the skin of an idle game. But considering how well it works as one, I hope the overlay style of idle game becomes a bigger thing, and I think this game can be thanked for that experience in some way. 18. Mika and the Witch's Mountain. So, you may have some guesses as to what Mika and the Witch's Mountain is trying to do just by looking at it, so let's start with what it accomplishes. This is a linear 3D platformer that is dressed up as a small open world. It's all in one location, but the level design promotes more thoughtful navigation through pre-made routes than freeform exploration. You straight up can't get to some places until you progress through the story. Luckily, the controls complement the level design well. Despite being a witch on a broom, you can't really fly, only fall with style. That is to say, glide. I know gliders are saturating the 3D platformer genre, but this case is a little different because it still very much feels like you are riding something unruly yet more powerful than your typical glider. It's still a vehicle you have direct control over. It's not hard by any means, but it's still one of the more unique control schemes I've ever felt for a 3D platforming character. Aside from the level design and the controls is the game's structure. You are a delivery witch. You have predetermined deliveries to go on and various side quests and distractions that all guide you very nicely across this island in a ways that allows the game to open up at a nice pace. The controls are strange and unique, but the level design is built around them, and the story will tell you where to go to allow for the most satisfying progression that the designers can muster. It works and is a fine little experience if that sounds fun to you, but I want to talk about the elephant in the room. So, let's talk about the 1989 Studio Ghibli movie, Kiki's Delivery Service. Kiki is a young, inexperienced witch who heads out on her own to complete a crucial step of her training by trying to find out how her powers can aid the community, but due to her lack of skills in magic, takes up delivering bread from a bakery on her broom. There's a lot more in the mix, but at its core, that's the premise. Here's the thing about Kiki. She was never going to learn how to do powerful spells to defeat a foe, or mix an Incredibles potion to stop a plague, or change in any magical way, because the most magical thing someone like her can do is grow up. It's a story about the community, and the lessons someone can take from it are some of the more special things in a person's life, even if it feels perfectly average. It makes the mundane beautiful, which is why I think it's something of a bedrock for the whole cozy/wholesome genre. How do you put that in a game? I don't know the answer for sure, but I can list several games that seem to relish in the mundane parts of life and can gamify systems to make the act of living pleasant. It's a hard task, and to try and go for that exact flavor 𝒔𝒐𝒆 is going for is even harder, because it's doing this all within a coming-of-age story. So not only is the mundane present and glorified, but there is still a noticeable change from beginning to end. If we are going to take the role of �𝒐𝒆 and don't recognize the change or experience it ourselves, the job isn't done. Not that it matters, because Mika's biggest crime is that despite taking a lot of cues from �𝒐𝒆, it doesn't really even try to engage with the major parts of it that make it special. Like I said, I think it's a very hard experience to translate, and I don't blame them for taking a well-designed, if safe, route. However, if they knew they couldn't accomplish what �𝒐𝒆 did, why bother with all the references? Free yourself more. Don't bother with the �𝒐𝒆 adjacent story and characters. If the tighter level design is what you are passionate about, don't worry about the delivery girl framing, and drop the open world. Mika is not a bad game, but I almost wish it was. I wish it had gone all in on trying to capture that feeling that �𝒐𝒆 first gave me. I feel a disaster that tried would have been more interesting than something like this that played it too safe.
Whoa!
17. Pepper Grinder. Let's talk a little about expectations. I played the first world of Pepper Grinder and had a blast. The drill mechanic is fast and fluid, the grapple made chaining sections satisfying, it had everything it needed to be a fantastic platformer, a lot to build off of. After a couple more worlds, I was a little less gassed. The mechanics didn't grow as much as I thought they could, and it was shifting focus away from the drill and the speed. That, in combination with the length of the levels, gave me a creeping sensation of fatigue. I didn't want to feel the urge to give up on the game because I thought there was going to be a lot more to offer later. This thought was backed up by the in-game shop too. Each world gives you a page in your collectible sticker book, and I didn't even have half of them yet. So I started to rush in an effort to see how the game opened up in the last half. I completely demolished the fourth world and fought an incredibly tough yet satisfying boss, and got credits. The game was over. Those pages I was expecting were just in the shop of the post-game. It was over in half the time I expected it to be. And in some part, that is on me. But at the end of the day, I felt baited, and this game left so much potential on the floor. 16. �𝒐𝒆. Speaking of a bad year for games, one of the hardest losses for me is going to be Annapurna Interactive. They were just a publisher, but I don't want to think of the developers I'd have missed, or the games I might never have played without their presence. They aren't completely dead, but it's looking grim. For now, let's be grateful for the stuff that we have, and that is still being funded. The first this year is �𝒐𝒆. �𝒐𝒆 is a creature collector where you explore a small open world and find colorful creatures to add them to your �𝒐𝒆. The thing I feel I need to address first is the marketing for this game, specifically regarding its multiplayer. Every presentation and trailer put out about this game emphasizes the online co-op, and even the first line in the Steam description says �𝒐𝒆 is a multiplayer co-op game. I don't know if I'm just missing out on a lot of hidden features, but this game is perfectly fit to be a single-player experience. The user tags seem to agree with me because none of them mention the multiplayer aspect. In fact, I'd go so far as to say I'm glad I played it alone. �𝒐𝒆 is a slow-paced game that rewards noticing the fine details in the environment. One of my favorite aspects of this game is the sound design. Each creature has a unique cry, and each family of animals shares similarities in their cry. It's more than possible to try and find an animal just based off of the properties of its cry, and given some of the camouflage they can employ in this game, it's a tactic much of the time. It's a tactic I used much of the time, at least. I can't imagine a friend group with the patience to do all of that over a voice call. These animals have such specific behaviors, I feel that there are a lot of patterns that you could ID to try and find more. However, the game does a poor job presenting its own information to the player. You are not discovering these creatures, just finding them again, so there are some hints given to help you seek them out. Most are general regions to start your search, while others have patterns like camouflage to be on the lookout for. Although most of the time in my playthrough, I would come across a creature randomly in my search for something else, and identify it without knowing what would have led me there to begin with. This wouldn't be a big problem if identifying the creature gave you a lot of information about it, but it acts as though once a creature is found, the player has a mastery over finding that creature again, which is simply not the case. Such basic things as a creature being nocturnal are left to the player to document themselves. There are so many little intricacies of the behaviors in this game that I believe are really important, but unless you notice them yourself, you're not noticing them ever. It's still a fun creature collector in a beautiful, stylized, small open world, but if the information gathering was a little deeper, this would have gone down as one of my favorites of the year. 15. Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door for Switch feels like cheating when it comes to conversations like this. It's a game I've played and loved before, and the only reason it's here at all is because a new coat of paint that did get me to pick it up again this year. I guess it's noteworthy that the experience is fully intact, because you better believe myself and a significant portion of the internet would have thrown a fit otherwise. But it's hard for me to say something about this game because it's been a known quantity in my life for so long. I guess what makes it special is the conversation though. New people will get introduced to this game now, and that feels good. I really hope new people get to grow up with this game, and I look forward to them being just as annoying about it as we have been for the past 2 decades. 14. 𝒔𝒐𝒎𝒆𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒈. I think I've come to realize something about myself over the years. If a game allows me to go underground and discover a cavern so big its ceiling might as well be the sky, I'll probably like it. And Astroneer's DLC, 𝒔𝒐𝒎𝒆𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒈, allows me to do just that. However, my feelings are still mixed. The DLC takes all the ideas of the base game and ties it to a single planet, and I think I still prefer the planet hopping experience of the base game. But, like I alluded to, it's the scale that's the selling point. I think the real disappointment is being unable to access the DLC until the base game is done. In fact, I'd go so far as to say they should have just risked a solo release, because being set loose on this world only to naturally discover it's a gravitationally functional planet would have been something else with this DLC. Just knowing you can walk around or dig through the entire planet makes for one of the most unique survival crafters out there, and I just had a blast going through the game again to play this DLC. 13. Little Kitty, Big City. The most damning thing I could say about Little Kitty, Big City is that I don't have a ton to say about it. It's a small open world game, and a relatively simple one at that, but it nails its theme. That theme is cat. Cat is the premise, thesis, mechanical influence, and overall driver of this game. Not just playing as a cat and the elegant yet simultaneously clumsy movement that entails, but the idea of a cat. What would the world look like through their eyes? How would they talk if their owners could give them the voices? What a person would do as a cat, and what a cat lover thinks a cat would do if given free range over an actually pretty small cityscape. That's what this game is, and if any of that sounds appealing to you, then I'm sure you'll find something to like about this game. I did, and I'm not even a cat person, but I found it enjoyable to do the stereotypical cat shenanigans. The writing actually kept me going quite a bit too. In addition to the said cat shenanigans are a series of little plots involving other animals around town that all play out like episodes of a cartoon that would air on 1 PM on a weekday. They were cute and engaging enough to actually make me quite glad to see the characters involved make little cameos on the final climb of the game. despite only interacting with them for a few minutes each mission. I can't even say it was a heartwarming game, it was just pleasant. But it was clearly aiming to be just that, so it's hard to fault them for their effort. Mission accomplished. See you soon, Crow. Definitely. And don't forget the shinies. 12. The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. I have 3 main somethings to say about this game. The big one is ultimately what everything comes back to, which is the echo mechanic. Making Zelda a summoner is not only a clever way to make her unique mechanically, but an incredibly interesting way to go about designing a puzzle game. I had a lot of high hopes for the echoes, but I think the nicest thing I can say about them is that they had a lot of untapped potential. Which leads me directly into my second something: the dungeons are bad. The dungeons are bad because they are basic, and I'm saying that as someone who has played Phantom Hourglass. The problem that ties these two things together is that Nintendo just wasn't willing to go as far as they could with the echo mechanic in terms of puzzle design. I think the mechanic itself is deep enough to have some truly boggling puzzles that would be sure to stump even Zelda lifers, but it's clear that's not what they wanted. They crafted fairly basic scenarios and puzzles so that everyone could get through with as many solutions as possible. Puzzling dungeons is just not what this game set out to do, and that will always be a little disappointing to me because the echoes are so deep. I feel like they had a chance to create some of the best puzzles in the series. If the echoes were fun to use, that is. The elephant statue in the room is the UI for selecting and using these echoes. Echoes are not just your combat, but also your movement through much of the world. So imagine for a moment that with every swing of your sword in Zelda's past, you had to open a menu and select your sword before using it. The lack of streamlining and options surrounding the echoes is one of the most baffling fumbles of game design in 2024. Hi, allow me to interrupt in post here. As punishment for my lateness, Nintendo has made me technically incorrect. With the recent Switch 2 patch, a favorites function was added to the game, making menu navigation infinitely less tedious. This does help enormously, but it's not a complete fix, and the game was without this function for nearly a year, so my intent largely stands. But boy, I love reviewing things in the modern games landscape where a massive crux of your experience can just be patched away as if it was never there. Anyway, back to the video. However, with all that in mind, I still really enjoyed my time with the game. Yeah, it's not as though the echo mechanic itself is bad, it's just annoying to access. And while the puzzle design may be a little lacking for someone like me, the encounter design is enjoyable all the way through. This game will throw so many different combinations of enemies and environments at you. Just when you think you have a groove and some echoes that can't be beat, you'll encounter some scenario that makes you question if you couldn't be doing things a little bit better. All of that works in perfect sync with the true achievement of this game, the overworld design. Never before have I felt this kind of just one more screen feeling from a 2D Zelda. Exploring the map, finding the encounters, and collecting new echoes and quests was one of my favorite parts of this game, and it made it very hard to put down. Or go back to the main quest where everything was boring. It really does feel like a melding of the 2D structure with some 3D open world sensibilities. Given a few more entries to perfect this melding, I feel like we could have something truly incredible on our hands. 11. Caravan Sandwich. Caravan Sandwich wins the Mixed Bag of the Year award. For just about every nice thing I can say about this game, I can find a negative point to pair with it. Let's start basic. The titular van. The van is cool, and it's fun to use. All of the upgrades you get for it feel unique and make going back to find places to use them fun. However, there was a disconnect for me. You can clearly see the things you can't interact with yet. Grapple points with no grapple, computers with no hack, so on and so forth. There is little to no surprise as to what you are going to be upgrading the van to do and where you need to use those tools. The problem is, the upgrades are tied to the narrative, so even though you can freely explore this world and find the places to use these upgrades, you have to pace yourself along the main story to do so. It's a really fine line, but if anything, I would have liked a bit more abstraction just so the gamey nature of the van wasn't so distracting. But even more than the van and the world, I would recommend playing this game for the narratives. The world building done in dialogue and side quests is really interesting, and there are some very cool pieces of sci-fi in here. Completely divorced from the mechanical benefit, I actively sought out the quests just because their plots were engaging. I just wish I could say the same for the main narrative. It does revolve around a mystery, so I can't say too much other than I wasn't personally satisfied. It seems to go for a rug pull, but kinda just left me a little off balance. You know what I mean? Number 10, 𝒔𝒐𝒎𝒆𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒈. I have such an appreciation for what �𝒔𝒈 is trying to do and what I think it could accomplish. The short version is, if you are interested in roguelikes or feel as though you just don't get the appeal, �𝒔𝒈 is the game you need to play. In some ways, it is the roguelike formula. It doesn't have a big twist, and I'm sure some veterans of the genre can point to other games doing aspects of this formula better. This is a top-down roguelike with bullet hell patterns, twin-stick shooting, a generous dodge, and meta progression. It's familiar territory. The two big things �𝒔𝒈 has going for it is its refinement and its length, being actually quite short. I think the main selling point and the reason I would want more people to try this game is because it is a full roguelite experience that you can complete in a couple hours. Not a singular run, the whole experience. And despite having meta progression, I still lean towards calling this a roguelike because that meta progression can be completed after an hour of runs. The satisfaction of roguelites comes from entering an impossible situation and working your way up to a workable situation, using some tools that follow you from run to run. �𝒔𝒈 not only condensed this experience, but also still has a fun roguelike experience after that. The conflict between the two genres is that a roguelike is about making interesting choices within a run to survive, and a roguelite flattens that curve over several runs, and takes the strategy away from the moment-to-moment play. �𝒔𝒈's approach is pretty blunt, making the game extraordinarily difficult at the start, and using meta progression to build up to an experience that should be at the start of your typical roguelike. Your meta strategy is now over, but the runs themselves are now more interesting. It's not elegant, but it is functional, and it is a great way to expose yourself to both sides of the genre. As for the runs themselves, they have all the genre staples. It's a build-based roguelike. You have multiple avenues to strengthen your character from stat changes, different dashes, screen clears, and passive items. That, in combination with different enemy behaviors, bosses, shops, special encounters, and a secret path to a true ending, makes this a really good microcosm of the genre. The one unique thing I'll bring attention to is how you attack. This may look like a twin-stick shooter, but there is heavy auto-aim, to the point where aiming is pretty unnecessary. Positioning and ammo management is the focus. Dashing is not just for avoidance, but also reloads your shots. You are free to dash whenever, but to encourage risky play, the end of your clip will deal critical damage with a multiplier you can upgrade over the course of your run. It leads to a lot of interesting strategies when considering your movement and upgrades, making rewards like decreased number of bullets an actually viable upgrade if you want to get to your criticals faster. In short, when it comes to the runs, it does exactly what a good roguelike should do, and makes the strategizing fun. The progress from the fragile little pea shooter to untouchable god is an enjoyable one every run, and I think this game is a great way to get someone into that kind of headspace. Become the god of �𝒔𝒈. He's done. He's so cooked. Unbelievably cooked. What a fraud. What a fraud. I mean, it was a good run until it wasn't, because I died. Number 9. 𝒔𝒂𝒈 and the Laser Eyes. You know who really deserves a puzzle game? Librarians. So I'm glad 𝒔𝒂𝒈 and the Laser Eyes came through with its document and math-based puzzles. Do you like solving math riddles and combing through a binder of documents to answer a question? Because if you do, then about 70% of this game was made just for you. As for the other 30%, I'm afraid you'll have to put up with some of the most visually and mechanically dazzling puzzles you've ever encountered, on top of the incredibly dreamlike noir the rest of the game is already glazed in. I kid. Yes, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes might be one of the most unique looking games I've ever played, but its story is not only deep, but told in such a dramatic and novel way it really takes a whole playthrough just to grasp the general outline. It's genuinely beautiful in ways that transcend just the aesthetic, and I think it is worth the shot even if you are casually interested. However, it is not without its faults, and my little jab has some true feelings behind it. There are a lot of puzzles that just rely on the documents and information provided without giving them a very strong foundation in the world. Mostly the math puzzles, which are more or less shortcuts. I actually do like the document system. Every image or piece of text you see is saved to your photographic memory, and while you may think this is to prevent you from needing to take notes, it really just cuts down on redundancy. This would be a triple-digit hour-long game for masochists that hate their wrists if these texts were not saved for you. I still ended up with 6 pages of handwritten notes. Now, before you go thinking, that's impressive, let me hit you with this. I looked up plenty of puzzle solutions in this game. I have no shame about that. In fact, one of my major complaints is that it's actually pretty difficult to look up puzzle solutions, because the solutions are all randomized every playthrough, and some puzzles don't appear in the same place. I'm going to give the creator the benefit of the doubt and assume that this was done to make replayability more viable. However, it's not as if this is a Metroidvania. It's a little non-linear, but you still need to see all aspects of the game to get to the ending, so I don't think the randomization was necessary to make replaying worth it. And, if the randomization was there just to make looking things up harder, fuck you. That is completely asinine and just outright hostile to the player. There is no hint or skip system, so the only way around a puzzle is through it. I'm not sad that I had to look up things, because that's how I enjoy these games. The puzzles are like knots. You have a lot of threads to pull at when you start, but eventually you hit a point that you just have to figure out. But when you do, a lot more threads and paths become available to you. I would have missed so many of my favorite moments if I just had to suffer at the 4 or 5 parts I really got stuck on. Honestly, I think this game is only this low on my list because the ending is one of those things. It's a puzzle that you build up through the whole game, but when clearing it, there is no way to determine what part you are doing incorrectly. It's hard to look up and it's hard to check, and if it weren't for my stubbornness and some people willing to go through my steps on a Reddit post, I never would have beaten this game. It's a one-of-a-kind experience both visually and narrative, but it is not a puzzle experience I would feel the need to return to ever again. Number 8. Splatoon Side Order. It's funny that it's number 8. I didn't do that on purpose, but it is. It's number 8. Splatoon is one of the secret best single-player games out there. Every time a new game comes out, it's the campaign I jump into first. And when DLC rolls around, you bet I'm just as excited to dive back in. Splatoon 3 Side Order is not only a great addition to Splatoon 3's single-player offerings, but something I never really expected Nintendo to come out with. A roguelite. Ascend 30 floors of a variety of challenges and bosses while powering yourself up with pallet chips, giving you unique buffs for a remainder of the run. It's a fairly standard formula, but that doesn't stop it from being finely crafted. Roguelikes have 2 routes they tend to follow that make each run feel different. The first is emergent scenarios, procedural yet ultimately unpredictable elements of each run that interact with each other and the player to make runs feel new and exciting. A lot of systems can fall into this category, but the only thing that Side Order has that would qualify are the enemies. There aren't a ton, but for what they lack in quantity, they make up for in utility. Some are just obstacles that need to be approached from specific angles, like the sniper-esque towers or the horde of small fries that make the player readjust their strategies on the fly. Others have obvious benefits to the player, like the tops that are just as deadly to your enemies as they are to you. It's not as dynamic as some roguelikes out there, but it's still deeply clever and makes the moment-to-moment decision-making more interesting. The other route roguelikes use is the one more favored by side order, which is the build. The player build is where you are going to get your run-to-run variants and, in my opinion, most of your enjoyment. Not only will they vary wildly each run, but they are seriously fun and often broken. Each of the 30 floors offers you a choice of 3 challenges, with the task, difficulty, and monetary rewards all differing. But the real draw are the palette chips. With several hues of palettes to specialize in, you can make some truly unique builds. Of course, you can go with Old Reliable, making your main weapon efficient and lethal enough to make the enemies feel like wet tissue paper before you, or you can take a risk and spec into the All Luck build that uses item drops, eventually becoming an unkillable god as you are showered in armor and screen-clearing CDs. Or, just abandon your weapons entirely and make your special move charge so fast you don't even need to fire a shot before you can use it again. There are a lot of possibilities, and that's not even touching on the weapon-specific chips. Not only could you optimize your build around not using your main, but your main may not end up as the same weapon as you entered with. Take the 𝒔𝒐𝒆𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒈, for example. Few people's pick as favorite due to its widespread, low damage, and constant mashing needed to use effectively. Well, with just a few chips, you can tighten that spread and even make it automatic, turning it into one of the deadliest guns in the game. I could go on, but at the end of the day, it's just a really good roguelite, and the main detractor is the only thing that allowed it to exist in the first place. It's an expansion, just a piece of a bigger game. If they wanted this to stand alone, I fully believe it could, but I am happy with what we got. Number 7. Valley Peaks. Another year, another climbing game. This year, it's Valley Peaks, a first-person frog former that lets you loose in the titular valley to explore a small open world and climb to the tops of various mountains. It's a very cute and charming game, but with that charm comes deception. This game has some serious teeth when it comes to climbing. Maybe that's just to be expected from any climbing game now. There is a bit of a stigma there. I find no problem in that. It was just a bit surprising how challenging this game could be. But for me, the balance was absolutely perfect. While the challenge is one aspect of this game that I find surprising, the thing I would emphasize more is just how clever it is. There are a lot of brilliant decisions made in this game that makes the whole thing work better than the sum of its parts. For example, the gadgets. There are a number of gadgets you can unlock that grant different abilities, and instead of your stamina being tied to your climbing, it's tied to your gadgets. This means they can be used in a lot of interesting ways, but you have to manage where and when to use them. They are also not technically required for any mountain. Instead, the mountains lean on level design and gimmicks to make the climbs themselves interesting. A good enough player never has to touch the gadgets. I did, of course, but it was fun experimenting with just how much I could get away with without relying on them. Not to mention, all the gadgets are very useful for climbs. However, that works in favor of the small open world. This game has an incredible back and forth between highly tailored challenges in the climbs and the more free-form exploration and platforming in the world. Whenever you finish or need a break from the climbs, you can mess around finding collectibles, completing missions, and experimenting with other gadgets on the ground in the open world. It's an ideal setup for an open-world platformer, and the contextualization of mountain climbs makes the more tightly crafted levels feel right at home. Not to mention, those levels are more abundant than you think. You want to climb each mountain. The story only requires that you get to the top, but to truly conquer it, you are going to need to climb each of its 3 paths. To say the mountains are levels is unfair because they are worlds. These paths almost never intersect, and they each utilize the mountain's unique mechanics to provide wholly different experiences. My only real complaint is more of a funny observation with these paths. These signs indicate the climb path. There is no other supplementary text. Now, tell me, in which order do these go in from easiest to hardest? Color seems to be the most obvious, getting darker with difficulty, but it could be shape, with more edges implying higher difficulty. Then you could have the actual number of mountain peaks on the sign that could indicate order, which seems like sound logic but goes so far against the other 2 methods of conveyance, I have a hard time believing it at all. So after a full playthrough and having completed all of the paths, which do I think it is? I have no idea. Number 6. Animal Well. If you know about this game, there is a good chance that is because of Video Game Donkey on YouTube and his new publishing company, Big Mode. Big Mode drew some controversy upon its launch simply because Donkey's platform was very much the selling point, which fairly didn't sit right with some people. However, in terms of YouTuber crimes, lauding a game that you helped produce is pretty much near the bottom, and I was also personally won over by the launch video that did put a nice spin to the whole situation and focused on the lead developer, 𝒔𝒐𝒎𝒆𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒏𝒈. As for the game, it's pretty good. I had very high expectations for this game. It looked amazing and was getting rave reviews during the preview phase. Critically, it was getting lumped in with a lot of my favorite games in the cheekily named Metroidvania genre. I think it was this that led to a little disappointment down the line. It does deserve to share space in the conversation with those other games, but it doesn't handle itself in quite the same way. The way I would describe it is that Animal Well has tiers. The higher the tier, the more brain you have to use. On this lowest tier, it's pretty much just a platformer. A really smart platformer, but you won't be impeded by puzzles as much as you would in even the easiest puzzlers. The map is gigantic, the animal interactions are interesting, and the items are very cool. I really think you could have a satisfying time just getting to credits in this game without leaving this tier. The second tier is Egg. In this tier, you get eggs. Eggs are the secret collectible of the game, and finding them is what fills out the game and leads you to the true ending. Finding them requires using tech and items not required for the base game and figuring out the deeper secrets of the well. It's very satisfying and just on the edge of what I consider doable for the extreme puzzle endings like this. The problem is, the barrier for this tier and the next tier is very blurry. The final tier that I know of is the bunnies. They are another much more hidden collectible, and since you are looking for both, it's not unreasonable that you find some bunnies on your quest for eggs. I only just realized how crazy I sound. What a sentence. Anyway, the problem is that some of the bunny puzzles make themselves more obvious than egg puzzles, like this odd room. This room is kind of emblematic of my problems with this game's structure. I am going to spoil this room for you, and even if you are very sensitive to spoilers, I implore you to listen. This is a bunny puzzle. This room is very unique and found very early in the game. It even has recognizable features on the map screen. It will be obvious that there is something to do, but you may not know what. Much later in your adventure, you will find a way into this side room that allows you to change the pixels in this panel and a code. This seems obvious then. Match the pixels to what this code indicates, and you are good to go. You just need more of these code clues. So where do you find them? Online. Every game only gives you one code, so the only reasonable way to figure this out is to work with people online, which, of course, has been done for months now. This is an ARG. Lots of games have them, probably even more than you would think. They are really cool, and I think it benefits a big puzzly game like this. I just don't know of another game that puts it front and center like this, mixed in with all the normal game content. It's just disappointing to have stuff like this occupy your mind the whole time you're playing, only to have the solution exist outside of your capabilities. It's still one of the most innovative and mysterious platformers to come out in a while, so just do your best with what you can, and don't be afraid to let a guide show you some of the deeper aspects of this game. Number 5. Elden Ring: Shadow of the Erdtree. I am not a perfect critic, and at the end of the day, no matter how much I want to focus on the small games that gave me joy this year, sometimes I just want to play more Elden Ring. I could not resist putting Shadow of the Erdtree this high on my list, even if it's just an expansion. But, so what? It's not the only one on this list, and some of my favorite parts of other games are their expansions. I honestly can't imagine someone playing Fallout 4 without Far Harbor, and now playing Elden Ring without the Land of Shadow is an even bigger omission. All it would have taken to convince me that Shadow of the Erdtree is good is to say it's more Elden Ring. But it's so much more than that. I got pretty defensive when people were saying that the original map was one of the best when it came to exploration, because I still had some other preferences in games that made exploration more the focus. But Now I no longer have that gripe. The Land of Shadow was my favorite place to explore in a video game. The way the world connects and curls around itself were so fun to unravel. I just couldn't stop picking at the edges of the map to find more. The vistas were breathtaking, the encounters were interesting, and the whole experience just felt like the best of what Elden Ring had to offer without an inch of the fat. But that leads me to the inevitable discussion surrounding any FromSoft game. I mainly played Elden Ring for the exploration. Managing my build was fun, and the encounter design can be great, but what really kept me going was finding new and unique areas to explore. And the main roadblock to that exploration is the difficulty. I will try to keep this brief, but I have to throw my hat into the ring. First off, I don't think anything absolutely needs to change, except the summoning. The difficulty is fine-tuned and deeply ingrained into the artistry of these games. I understand all that, and can appreciate that on an artistic level, but that doesn't mean I can't complain about it as someone who had made it through the whole experience alone. I very nearly gave up several times over the course of this playthrough, and before you speak, no, the satisfaction of winning each fight was not worth it. I would have much more enjoyed my time if I could simply skip some of these harsher moments. What bugs me most is really the conversation around it, because there seems to be two sides of the difficulty debate. On one hand is the get good argument. Just put in the time to learn the fights on an instinctual level and leave no room for error, or, fun. I'm exaggerating, but this is the side of the fanbase everyone is more or less familiar with. The other side of the argument is basically the opposition to that exact mentality. Skill is not as big of a factor as you would believe. Any challenge is mutable in the Souls series given the right approach so long as all the advantages are properly taken. Find a build, find a summon, find a strategy. There is always some way around a problem that isn't just bashing your head into a wall. And on a philosophical level, I do agree and appreciate that about these games. However, what bothers me most is that when you boil it down, these two seemingly contrary opinions are asking the same thing of you. The one thing that no methodology can avoid when it comes to a game as large and as challenging as Elden Ring is time. If you are finding yourself struggling with this game, there is just no way around some of the ridiculous time investment you need to move on. Is there really that big of a difference between 3 hours of honing my current strategy around a boss versus a 3-hour side quest to grind or make a new build around them? If my enjoyment lies on the other side of said boss, I'd argue no. Thankfully, that side quest mentality is kind of the ethos of Elden Ring's entire open world, so I could at least limit how many true dead ends I reached, but I still found them far too often. Shadow of the Erdtree is truly the peaks and valleys of Elden Ring for me. The exploration and unraveling of the lands was something I won't forget, but the difficulty and the hours I had to spend to fully unravel that knot will always taint that memory for me. 4. Yellow Taxi goes vroom. So, I take notes and do little audio logs to collect my thoughts every game I beat, so it's easier when I talk about it in these videos. My audio log for Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom was 30 minutes. 30 minutes for a game that looks like this. Also, the skyboxes, man. And the clouds are poop. It's truly A-tier level design. Nearly 25 of that was just me gushing about the mechanics of driving and reeling over just how fun it is to control this goofy-ass car. So, maybe you should just play it and save us both some time. I'll tell you now, it's not a perfect game. It's energetic and colorful, but its writing isn't always on par. Not just immature, but some of its jokes are actually bad, and a little dated even. Might just be best to take a look for yourself. This is one of the games I did a full stream and even a highlight edit of over at Rye Royal. But yeah, that's about it. In every other regard, it's one of the smartest, well-executed platformers I've ever played. And there isn't even a jump button. But now, if we use the 1 pixel of this water tower that I can't get on top of. Okay. No. Yep. Nope. Yep. Just, yep. That's how you do it. Nope. Get left. Nope, I'm not positioned yet. I have to stand still long enough to... Fine. That's plenty. Yeah. And now I will use 1 pixel of this water tower. No, nope, 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 nope. Hold on. There we go. And that is how you play this game. 3. Harold Halibut. Just looking at the back of the box makes the premise of Harold Halibut sound a little bleak. It's a sci-fi story. The characters are the descendants of a space mission from Earth that got stranded on an ocean planet and have now been living miles underwater in the hobbled remains of their ship. It's been nearly a generation since impact and everyone has kinda just moved on. The whole colony is owned and operated by a single company and the hope of leaving has all but evaporated. It sounds straight up dystopian, but the first achievement of this game is giving that setting and context a cozy tone. The art style is a major contributor to this. Apart from being gorgeous, the claymation gives this world a layer of childlike warmth. It's easy to get invested in because so much of the lighting and set design is photoreal, but the clay provides a character to everything that you really only get in fiction. The setting is fascinating with a great framing device, but it's far from the focus, and has the ability to be what all character-driven stories ultimately need their setting to be: a backdrop. This game is carried by its story, and it's a story that is driven by being a game. The more you invest in this game, the more you interact with its world, and the more you delve into the little vignettes, the better the story is going to be for you. This is a story about characters, with all of them feeling like a living part of this ship. I liked some more than others, but they were all very believable. If you follow them, they each get their time to shine, and if you don't, they don't. But the one character you can't avoid is the one that makes this game worth playing. Harold Halibut should go down in gaming history as one of the best playable protagonists in the medium. There are a lot of ties between the player and Harold, but you are not Harold. He has his own voice, he has his own character, and this game is about him. I want to call Harold a lovable sort, but when we first meet him, he's kinda just a space in the room. He's not apathetic or a do-nothing. In fact, sometimes he feels like the only one on this entire colony that gets anything done at all. But he is fairly directionless. Harold is kind and childlike in his mannerisms, but is lacking in the kind of interpersonal relationships adults typically have. From his employers to his love life, he clearly has trouble making connections, and aside from whatever task he is given each day, he is also largely passionless. He knows there is something missing, but he also has no real clue on what that is, or where to start looking. And then the plot starts happening. Suddenly there is a new presence added to the ship, and as it becomes more widely known, the more starts to revolve around Harold as a conduit for this new thing. I'm sorry if the vagueness is frustrating. It's not as though even the trailers are as shy about spoilers as I am, but I really think it's best to unravel as much as possible alongside Harold. This is a sci-fi story though, and it really does a wonderful job presenting a truly alien feel and not just a foreign one. The vibe shifts in the colony, and with it so does Harold. He starts to grow. He is still doing the odd task for whomever asks it of him, but now there is a passion in him, and with it, happiness. The interactions get deeper, and it's clear to the player that Harold is actualizing in a way. What's brilliant is that this is all very gradual. I really don't know if this could have been done over the course of a movie or a show, because it's the pacing and tone that the game brings that leads to its function. It just wouldn't have worked as well if we didn't also have so many other plots vying for attention. There is a lot going on in the plot of this game. The supporting characters and the setting make them all really interesting and important feeling. So many times in this game I felt as though the current conflict was the one that was going to escalate through to the story's climax. Again and again, a new conflict would arise only to be resolved or relegated to a minor inconvenience. I wasn't bothered by this, just baffled. These problems felt so big, the solution so out of reach. Out of Harold's reach. But I think that is more or less the point. They are distractions. The conflict was never really about all of the things going wrong with the colony, it was about Harold. And it was a conflict only Harold could do something about. The events of the plot may have teased out these subtle changes, but it was still ultimately Harold that had to instill them. The whole game, Harold was just kind of along for the ride and willing to be an instrument for other people's use. even yours. He is still your puppet, but he is not your character. The last change, the big one, the real climax, is one you cannot alter or guide him to. It was a slow, tense moment that the game just wouldn't let go easily, because even if by this point you, the player, knew what would be best for the story, there was no guarantee that Harold would feel the same way or even act upon these feelings if he did. You can only watch, and it was a moment I'll never forget. Finding the joy, the humor, and the warmth at the bottom of an alien ocean was quite the accomplishment, and I'm glad I got to be a part of it.
All water compliments you on your choice of destination.
Number 2. Another Crab's Treasure. I am by no means a Souls master. I haven't even played all the games in the series that gives the genre its name, but I can say that Another Crab's Treasure may be my favorite. As I grow more experienced and, let's be real, more cynical in regards to games, one thing I continuously value is the feeling of real adventure. When I was a kid, my experiences were so limited, I often came away from games feeling a whole extra life had been crammed into the runtime. Being able to look back and simply marvel at how far away the beginning of an experience felt from where you ended up. It's a much rarer feeling for me now, but it's still one I value most. Another Crab's Treasure is not the deepest, no pun intended, mechanically, or most dramatic narratively, but it is adventurous. You are Krill, a little hermit crab that is fighting the greatest threat in the land: taxes. Yes, the first of many jokes in this game is that the inciting incident centers around you losing your shell to a tax collector. After a little tutorializing, you get your main weapon, the fork, and are let loose on this world. This game is in a lot of ways a simplified version of a Souls-like, but in that simplicity there is a lot to work with. You'll only have the one weapon, but it can be upgraded with additional moves that can be learned from a skill tree. There are a lot less attributes to spec into, but the ones that are there are a lot more impactful and will gate off what you can and can't use. It's got plenty of its own ideas, though. The shell mechanic is the obvious one, with each shell having different stats and spells associated with them. A nice surprise was all of the movement mechanics in this game. The Souls series didn't have a proper jump until 2019, so imagine how delighted I was to find that this game has a not insignificant focus on 3D platforming, with a jump, a swim, shell rolling, and a grapple fish hook. In general, it's just a lot smoother of an experience for someone that is as gamerly challenged as myself. I did have an easier time with this game, but if that's a turnoff for you, just download a completed file and jump into New Game Plus. Turn what is typically a victory lap per Souls games into a sadistic challenge run. What's this? Oh my god.
No.
Oh my god, that killed me instantly. Oh my god. Get your teeth kicked in by a new joke boss right outside of the tutorial for 40 minutes of your second stream ever. Ow. Oh my god, what the fuck? Oh no, chat. If this is the entry to New Game Plus, this might actually be the whole stream. This game has a lot to offer, and what I appreciated about it most is that it doesn't suggest its full scope until you are a good way through and quite comfortable with the game already. And even then, it has a number of tricks to make the experience cascade over itself until you reach an insurmountable climax. The game just kept going, and every time it did, it was a delightful surprise. Truly, another treasure. See you later. Crap. That's crap, in case you didn't know. This game's actually very subtle about its swears. Saying crab is a funny way of saying crap. That's hilarious, isn't it? Number 1 for 2024 is Frog Monster. I've moved the top 5 around a lot, but I think I'm going with Frog Monster as my game of 2024. The only strange thing about that is I only played it a couple of times. Yep, only a couple of sessions that accumulated into 22 hours of gameplay. I was hooked, and I don't even think of myself as a boomer shooter guy. There was just something different about this game, man. The trap with all good FPS games is attempting to describe how they feel. It's hard to escape the vapid definitions of moving and shooting apart from fun and satisfying. You have a grappling hook, I guess. Oh, and it's your tongue because you're a frog, so that's good. You are bouncy and fast, but you're always in control, so there is little else you can ask for. The arsenal and charms are wonderful, but more or less what you'd expect. The major shakeup is that you have equipable spells that act as your only source of healing. I saw a post from the dev on Twitter that was showing off a boss, and that's what really got me interested. I haven't played a game that executed the voxel art style to this kind of scale. The art itself is amazing, but it also seems incredibly efficient. The lighting is just incredible, and there are no loads in this entire game. I've heard people call this a Metroidvania, but aside from a couple instances of new tools getting you to the immediate next area, I would disagree. I think what makes people feel that way though is the fact that you can walk from one end of the world to the other without a break in the gameplay. It's still tightly designed levels, they just flow into each other quite naturally. But as much as I like wandering through this world, the boss and encounter design is what really kept me going. 20 unique bosses doesn't sound totally mind-blowing until you play the game and experience just how different they are. The boss design in this game puts the rest of the industry to shame. Bosses all have their own unique arenas, most have their own gimmicks or entire mechanics, and they all have multiple phases. They are rewarding to fight, and even more so to master, because some of these guys are complete bastards. Really, the whole game is. I struggled in sections of this game more than any other. Even some of the normal enemy encounters of this game gave me more trouble than some bosses. But it always felt doable. I had plenty of ways to experiment, and I had enough leeway. I always felt as though I was just one idea or one attack pattern away from surviving. What put this game over the edge is that beyond an adventure, it really felt like fighting in a mythical struggle. There is little in the way of text or story, but what is there does track. There are some rules to this world, and you can observe them in action. Everything else just feels strange and magical. These lands don't make sense for living in, but they're also too strange to just feel like video game levels either. The closest comparison I can think of is Wonderland. You can open doorways into places across the map. A lot of spaces don't make sense geographically or spatially. It feels really weird to go on about this when you play as a frog with a gun, but there is still a sense of magic here. But that is a lot of somethings for every game I played in 2024. It was a big year with a lot of changes for me. Thanks again if you came out to watch me record this live, and if you want to see more from me, I'll be a bit more regular over at youtube.com/@RyeRoyal with some stream highlights, or just live on Twitch. At the least, I'm sure I'll be back to say something about 2025. It's been an interesting one. Until then, I'll see you in the next one. Oh shoot, I forgot that 𝒔𝒐𝒆𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒈 technically launched this year. Well, that's okay. It's not like I played it that much anyway.